What is going on, guys? It's David from AquaOtter, and welcome back to a brand new series on the channel. It is our second chapter review series, and we are going to be covering, if you can't tell by the big logo down in the corner, My Hero Academia. So I just spent the entirety of this week. It is now Friday the 26th. The new chapter of this series comes out on the 28th. And I just spent the entirety of this week just powering through. I was at like chapter 130, so I just had to read almost 200 chapters in this 1 week to get caught up because I needed to talk about this chapter. We're covering chapter 306. I'm not going to go into the chapter name or anything because that's going to come at the end. It's very important to the way this chapter is laid out. But yeah, I needed to get to this point, and I really wanted to get this out after I read chapter 306. I was just going to wait and cover chapter 307, but I felt like this was a good chapter to start the reviews on. So here we are. And with that long-winded explanation, I do actually want to start, because this is my first My Hero Academia review. I want to kind of cover a little bit about what's been happening in the series up to this point, so anybody who is maybe a little lost by just jumping in here. But so up to this point, we are now dealing with the fallout of the war arc. And basically the past couple of chapters have all been just checking in with the people who got injured during the war arc. The war arc is now over. We're kind of moving into the post-war arc. I would call these like last series of chapters. And so we checked in with Bakugo, who got hurt. Bakugo is fine. He's his normal rambunctious self. We checked in with Hawks and Best Jeanist, who are out. We got Hawks' backstory, found out about like his dad, who was the criminal and everything, and we found out that Hawks and Jeanist kind of want to team up to help out Endeavor, and we get the reunion for the first time of all of the Todoroki family. The mother is there. Well, not all of the Todoroki family, because obviously we found out that whole thing with Dabi. But yeah, we get the reunion of that. We get the flashback to find out what happened to Toya. And then we find out a little bit about what happened with Deku, and he's in a coma right now. He's communing with the predecessors of All for One, and we had a few chapters of that. The chapter right before this, chapter 305, was the entire chapter that was dedicated. It was the interaction between Deku and Shimura, or Nana Shimura, where she was talking about, she asked Deku just straight up, do you have the strength to kill Shigaraki if you come up against him, because he is evil, like All for One needs to be ended. Do you have the strength to kill him? And of course we had that big moment with for Deku's character growth, where he said to the predecessors, you know, One for All is a quirk that was designed to save people, so I want to save Shigaraki. And now we pick up with this chapter, and I want to start by talking about the color spread. We have an awesome color spread for the cover page here. It is on the one side, it is Deku, who is holding a TV with All for One on it, and Deku looks really cool. He's it looks like he's got a new costume on. I don't know if that's just drawn for this, but he does, and we will see this a little bit later, getting into a little bit of spoilers as to what's coming for the chapter. But we see him, he's got the big yellow, like Gran Torino's cloak looking thing around his neck. And then on the other side, we have Tamura Shigaraki, who is holding a TV with All Might's face on it. And it's really good. It's a very nice contrasting imagery. Both of them have the cloaks on. You have the Gran Torino cloak on Deku, and you have this like black billowing cloak on Shigaraki. But getting into the actual chapter, we start off with, we have All Might. In the past few chapters, All Might has been sitting alone in the room with Deku, and he's been touching Deku's hand because he can feel, he's not quite sure as to what's going on, but he can feel the conversation that is happening within Deku with all of the predecessors, because All Might, even though he's still alive, there is this shadow of him that exists within One for All that is present during these like these times where Deku communes with them. And so All Might is saying, he says, it's not words exactly, more like these feelings that I'm getting off of you. Your chat with the predecessors, the truth about One for All, my master's inner conflict, of course talking about Nana, his master, Nana Shimura. And then as he's thinking this, there's a knock on the door. And he takes his hand off of Deku and he goes to see who's at the door. But as he's walking over, the thought process continues. And he says, I only sense these things faintly, what your quirkless self has to say to me, though not exactly in words. And then he opens the door, and Hawks and Best Jeanist are there on the other side of the door. So it would appear that this is actually the first time that Hawks and All Might have actually met, because Hawks introduces himself. He says, "Nice to meet you, All Might," and then he says, they say that I'm the type of hero who moves a little too fast, so I've rushed over here with a bunch of questions for you. And he asks if Midoriya is alright, and All Might responds by saying, "Yeah, it seems like he's out of the woods. In fact, I think he'll actually be coming to pretty soon." And All Might ends up kind of walking away with Hawks as Uraraka and the other people who were outside waiting to see Deku. They all go in to see him, and Hawks tells him, he's like, I need to talk to you about One for All. And so Hawks basically fills in All Might about what the heroes had overheard during the war arc that Shigaraki had said to Endeavor, this concept of One for All. And he tells him that Endeavor had said that Shigaraki, it seemed like Shigaraki was going after Midoriya. And so he says, he's like, I'm sure they might have misheard or whatever, but we're just kind of trying to chase down every lead that we can at this point. And he says something which kind of reflects upon the state of the world at this point, which is that going forward, it's not just the villains that the heroes have to fight. They have to fight society's expectations of what heroes are at this point, because society has completely lost faith. And we saw this in some of the previous chapters. Society has completely lost faith in heroes' abilities to protect them. And so you see All Might, and he has this flashback to when he first was telling Izuku about the power of One for All. And he's telling him about how it's a secret that's meant to protect him, and he needs to keep the secret at all cost. And then he thinks to himself that at this point, we're pretty much past that. We're pretty much past the secret. Like, it's got to come out now. But so he basically tells them, like, listen, we need a little bit of privacy. Why don't you follow me? And he tells them, like, I'll tell you about One for All. And then at this point, we cut away from that conversation completely to, we actually see Principal Nezu back at UA, and he's on the phone. And it doesn't really matter what he says at this point, because we're going to circle back to this later in the chapter, but it's just kind of showing us, like, he's on the phone with someone, and he says, like, yeah, like, we're going to be relying on your help for all of this, and this is something that we're going to end up circling back around to. And so the next couple pages of this chapter are all focused around checking in with the general unease. It's 3 days have passed since this conversation with All Might and Hawks, and the heroes are having a press conference to address what happened during the war. And the narrator at this point is kind of telling us that the general public, like, not everyone has completely lost faith in the heroes, but what they need out of this press conference that's happening is they need reassurance from the heroes. They need them to go out and kind of tell everybody that what they heard was wrong. They need to be told that, like, this thing that Dabi told everyone about Endeavor, like, that's not the truth. What they were shown about Hawks, with Hawks killing twice, and Hawks' past as a criminal, and murdering Jeanist, like, all that kind of stuff. They just need them to go out and reassure them that, like, no, we are the pillars, and all of this, we hold absolute upright justice. But that's not what we get, because during this press conference, the first thing that we see from the press conference is we see Endeavor stand up in front of everybody and just flat out admit to everything. He tells everyone about his past with Toya and what happened with his family, how he abused his wife and his children, all in the pursuit of power and all this kind of stuff. And we see all these flashes to people who are watching the press conference, people who are there in the audience, and how they're reacting to this news. And there are these people who are saying, like, oh man, like, he's done. And all these people who are just shocked and, like, cannot believe, like, oh my god, like, that's true. And they're like yelling out, like, okay, so that's true, but clearly the stuff about Hawks and Jeanist can't be true. And Hawks says, no, like, I enlisted Jeanist's help to help me convince the League that I was on their side so that I could deeper infiltrate them. But everything that he said about my past, my criminal background with my father, all of that is true. And what he said about me killing that villain who's running away, yes, that's true. And he says, but in the case of Twice, in the case of Jin, he says that the quirk was so concerning to him that his quirk alone could have turned the tide in the favor of the villains. And he was so concerned about the amount of lives that would be lost just from this one man's quirk that he had to do what he thought was right at that moment. And even though he was running away, even though it meant taking his life, he did what he felt was right in order to save the lives of his fellow heroes who were there to perform the raid. And then there's someone in the audience of the press conference who raises her hand, and she talks about how her mother was injured in the attack when Gigantomachia had, torn through the cities. And she says, like, what are we supposed to do here? I have someone that I know that was injured. Are we just supposed to accept your apologies, your sorries? Like, you're stone-faced up there. Like, how are we supposed to know that you're sorry? And Endeavor just very calmly replies, if we showed you our pain and exhaustion and tears, would that change anything? And she's a little bit taken aback by this. Like, a lot of people seem very taken aback by this. And she says, well, no, of course not, but you need to put society at ease. You need to take down every single villain, like, one by one. You need to make us safe. And Endeavor basically says, that's exactly right. That's how I, as Endeavor, can atone. And then Genis takes over, and he explains what we saw earlier from Nezu. He says that moving forward, the population of Japan, they're all going to be housed in the hero schools. The big facilities are going to become hero schools. So UA and Shiketsu High and like the other hero schools all throughout Japan, they're being turned into evacuation zones, because right now a very large portion of the cities are all destroyed. There are tons of people who are homeless. He states about how the students' parents are actually already moving in to the schools, and you see that Bakugo's mom and Izuku's mom are actually, you get like a little flash of them like moving in to the school. And there's a bunch of outrage at this, people saying like, you expect us to just move forward by living in shelters? Like, that's not really going to cut it. And they respond by saying, this is exactly for the sake of moving forward. We need to make sure that everyone is safe right now. And Endeavor says that all of your criticisms, all of your doubts, anything that you have negative, put them on me, but just watch me. And he flames up. He becomes Endeavor, because up to this point he hasn't had the fire on his face or anything. And he says, just watch me. Very similar to the way he said it right back during when he became the number one, that speech he gave where he's like, I know that there are a lot of people who don't trust me, don't think that I can hold up and become the next pillar, but just watch me, judge me by my actions, not by my words. And there's some narration here as you flash to a bunch of people who are very, I don't know if it's very clearly that they're watching the press conference, but you see a bunch of heroes, and there's the narration that says, yes, the heroes were put through a sieve, and if you define hero as someone the people look up to and count on, then the heroes really did vanish that day, and yet some people were still prepared to stand up and fight. And you see Wash, you see Mount Lady, who is, she's all bandaged up and hurt. You see Mirko, who is like tightening a little like strap around her arm, because obviously she lost her arm during the war. You see Aizawa, who has an eye patch, and you see Kamui Woods. I'm assuming this is Kamui Woods. It's a little vague, but it looks kind of like him. And then you see Dabi, and Dabi's kind of laughing at this, and he just says, I guess I didn't go far enough. People still have faith. Yeah, so that's where the press conference portion of this ends. A lot happens in this chapter. There is a lot. But so now we're getting into the closing moments. I believe these are the last 3 pages. There's this page and then the final 2 pages. So now we go back to the school, and we see that in reference to One for All, the narrator says that when Endeavor was asked about One for All, he simply said that he didn't know. And he said that because obviously he does know, because All Might now told the people who need to know. So we can assume that because he told Hawks and Genis, that now Endeavor also knows, since all 3 of them are teaming up. And he did this because he didn't want to put a target on Izuku and All Might. And we now see the former Class 1A, now Class 2A, and they're all reacting to these letters. So Midoriya, he came out of his coma, obviously, and he hand wrote every single person in Class 1A, once again now Class 2A, but I feel like for anybody who follows the series, you're going to know them as 1A, even though they're second years now. And you don't get to see all of them, but you do get to see Uraraka's. And the gist of the note is basically that he has now told everyone in Class A the secret of his quirk. He's told everyone that All Might gave him his quirk, that All for One was targeting him, that the League of Villains have been targeting him and his quirk since the beginning. And so you see everyone reacting to the letters, and you specifically are focused on Uraraka's response to the letter. And so Uraraka just kind of takes the note, and she's staring at it, and then she just thinks to herself, but she doesn't think to herself, she says out loud, but she just says, like, "You big dummy." And there's this narration at this part that kind of picks up from where the past narration with where it flashed over the heroes, it kind of picks up from that. And it says, "But if you define a hero as someone willing to suffer in silence, then who's there for them when they're in pain?" And I really like this because I think that so my impression with what Uraraka's story arc is going to be is that I feel like she is going to end up focusing more on saving the heroes, because there was that whole thing when Black Whip first manifested and it was like exploding out of Deku and he didn't know what to do and no one knew how to stop him, where she just threw herself like into his arms to try and help him. And there was that whole thing back then that was kind of very similar to this narration, where she was like, all these heroes that save people, but who saves the heroes? So I do like this. I don't know where it's going to go. I honestly have no clue where it's going to go. But this is where we move into the final page. And it begins with a flash forward. We flash forward to April. And it is basically a double page spread. There's two panels across the 2 pages. And it says April to give us this frame of reference. And it says, Deku left the Hero Academy. And you see Deku, he's standing on top of a building. He is still wearing the tattered clothing that he wore during the war, with the arms completely ripped to shreds, the legs kind of ripped to shreds. It's all dirty and musty. It's been a little bit modified. Like he has these bands wrapped around his arms and everything, and he's got this big billowing cape, which, as I said when we were covering the color page, he's got this big Gran Torino-esque cape. It might be, my theory is that it is Gran Torino's cape. I don't know what that means about, like, for Gran Torino. I don't think that Horikoshi would kill him off screen, but, you know, because we did see that he survived. He was just kind of in critical condition. And so yeah, we're getting Vigilante Deku, which is a little nuts to me. And so just to finish up with what is happening here, so there in this big spread where you see Deku in the Vigilante outfit, the torn up clothing, the big, you know, you see in the city that he is standing high above, some buildings are collapsing, and he just kind of goes to pull his hood down, and he's got this like almost dead look in his eyes as he just says, "A giant villain," like just kind of acknowledging that there's a villain that he's got to go take care of. And that's where the chapter ends. And so, man, what to say about this? What to say about this chapter? Oh, I forgot. So that's not the only thing that's on this page. We actually get the title of the chapter, and I can't believe that I almost started like getting into my wrap up without talking about it. The title of the chapter is, it's number 306, The Final Act Begins. So this is insane. And I don't know if you can tell just from my description of it, but you can kind of see why I really wanted to get this specific chapter review out, even though the next chapter comes out in like 2 days. Because there's so much to theorize on here, and it's really kind of like the perfect jumping on point for someone to start following. Specifically, like me, I'm jumping on very late to doing these reviews, but it seems like something, it's right at the end of something and right at the beginning of something, and I am so confused as to what's going on. So I do want to state one thing, because this chapter has been out for a while, so reviews are out there. It's been kind of hard to not see spoilers. I did go into this chapter pretty much unspoiled, except for one thing that I saw, which was a theory tweet, and there were people theorizing that the building that Deku is standing on is the Chrysler Building in New York City, which would mean that Deku is now in America, which would kind of be an interesting tie-in, because we just saw a few chapters ago that they're trying to bring in the foreign heroes from America to help out with the situation in Japan with the villains. But so, that would be very interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. I just kind of am going to go with the flow at this point and see if that is the case. I would like that. If it's not the case, I'm totally indifferent as to whether I would want it to happen or not. I would like to see the American heroes come in. I think that would be a really interesting direction to take the story. But let's address the elephant in the room. The title of the chapter. The final arc, the final act begins. What does this mean? Is this the end? I like, it seems pretty definitive that this is saying, like, this is the end. Like, we are moving into the final act of the story. And I don't know how... So, I feel like most people believe that. And I feel like most people think that, like, this is Horikoshi saying, this is definitely, like, this is the final act. It's going to be long. Like, it's... I know that most My Hero arcs are not very... not very long, not a whole lot of chapters, but this isn't going to be something that's wrapped up by the end of this year. This is probably gonna take us all the way through to, I would say probably, if I had to work off of the assumption that Horikoshi is ending the series, I would say mid 2022, late 2022. I think that's probably how long this is gonna span. But so, where do I fall on it? I don't think so. I really don't think so. And I honestly don't think I would care to be wrong about it, honestly. If it's ending, that's fine, because I have always said when I look at stories that I much more appreciate a story that is not afraid to end. A story that isn't drawn out for the sake of being drawn out. I'm going to talk about a very non-anime thing here, but I loved the show Supernatural, and I don't want to anger people by saying that I ended up not really loving the show Supernatural after a while. And I always felt like the first 5 seasons of that show were a complete, tightly wrapped and finished story. But then that show ended up going on to have like 15, 16 seasons. And it just kind of lost me. Like, I couldn't get invested in the story, because to me, it just felt like making episodes to keep the story going. So if Horikoshi is planning on ending, good, honestly. I feel like I'm happy. I can be happy with the product that we got. And I don't want him to stress himself out by trying to milk the story, and I certainly don't want the quality of the story to drop because he wants to keep it going. But I personally believe that this is the final arc of this whole All for One story. I don't know what's going to come after this. I know that certain people have been theorizing that maybe this is going to lead into a, for lack of a better term, My Hero Academia Shippuden, where we're going to get a more intense time skip, and then maybe it's not going to be Academia anymore. Maybe the time skip will happen when this is all over. This arc is going to end with Deku going back to school, and then we'll have a skip forward to when they graduate, and it'll be, just Deku and, the people adjusting to hero life, and then some other new threat will rise up, and it'll still be Deku's journey to become the greatest hero. But yeah, I believe that it is not the end, and the main reason that I believe that is I still feel like where we're at in the story right now, because as we learned in the very first chapter, this is the story of Deku's rise to become the greatest hero, the number one hero. And I don't think that we are going to span enough ground to get him there. And like I said, I gladly prove me wrong, but I'm kind of fine with that. And, yeah, so I don't have any predictions, but here's my hopes moving forward for the next couple chapters. I hope that we get to see I hope that we're not just focused on Deku. I don't, because even though some people would disagree with me, I don't think that this is just a story about Izuku. I really don't. Even though, like I just said, this is the story about how he becomes the greatest hero. It's very much to me a story about Class 1A. And I don't want to completely abandon them just to focus on what's going on with Deku. I would be fine with a few chapters of just that, but I want them to cut back and forth. I want to know what's happening with everyone else. I want to know what's happening with Endeavor and Hawks and Genist. I want to know like what's going on with All Might. Did All Might also disappear? Is Deku on his own? Like, what's happening? There's a lot that I would like covered, and I really hope that we don't completely break away from these characters. So other things that I would like to see, I definitely want to deal with Stain. I've been waiting for Stain to come back forever. I want to see what's happening with the big three, because now they're graduated. So yeah, what's going on with Sun Eater? What's going on with Lemillion and Hado? Like, what's going on with those three? Eri, like, what's going on with them? It kind of goes back to what I was just saying about wanting to check in with all the characters. But yeah, so my hope is that this story arc is not the end. I don't want it to be the end. I would be fine if it was, but I don't want it to be. And yeah, general thoughts on this chapter. It was really good. It was really good. I have a very fraught relationship with My Hero Academia. I was starting to read it because I wanted to cover it, because I know it's a big series. I like the anime. I think the anime has been pretty much fire. But when I got to the point past the anime, specifically the bit that's being covered in this upcoming season, season 5, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't like. And then there was some stuff during the war arc that I didn't like, and some stuff during the MVA arc that I really didn't like. But it's very fluctuating for me. I like it and I don't like it. But overall, I'm just hoping to be entertained, and I have total faith that Horikoshi is going to pull through whatever his vision is. So yeah, with that being said, I will see you guys sometime next week. I'm definitely not getting the chapter review for 307 out on Sunday, but I am going to be doing another chapter review for chapter 307. It does come out in 2 days. It is 2 days at the time of recording this video. But yeah, just keep an eye on the channel. It will be going up. I do, before I completely end the video, here in the wrap-up, I do want to say, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. If you want to see more, please make sure that you subscribe. And if you would, maybe click the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I put out a new video. I have been really working hard on trying to make more content for you guys. And speaking of more content, I don't know if everyone saw. If you didn't see, please check out the social media, specifically the Twitter, which is down in the description. The Twitter is where I post most of my stuff. The Facebook as well is a great place to stay informed. But I actually, on Friday last week, put out a podcast on Spotify, and I've been working really hard behind the scenes to get this podcast out. I was very, very happy with the way that it turned out, and there are going to be more episodes of it coming. It's a project that I'm really, really excited to work on. So yeah, that is also going to be linked down in the description. If you haven't given a listen to it yet, please go check it out. It would honestly mean the world to me. And yeah, so like, subscribe, check the link in the description to go check out the podcast, and leave a comment, actually, if you do go listen to the podcast, letting me know what you think about it. But until then, I'm going to see you guys in chapter 3007. So yeah, bye-bye. Plus Ultra.